people who are immunocompromised, and the people who are elderly. Right now, it's not clear to me that everyone has equitable access to those antiviral tablets. So someone like President Bush can easily have access to the best medical care as well as Paxlovid, and so can our Vice President. But is that the case for everyone in this country, for low-income workers or undocumented individuals in this country? That's my concern.
I wonder if we could define that term when he referred to endemicity, to this pandemic becoming endemic. In that same interview, Dr. Fauci talked about what he referred to as the control phase that he says the country is transitioning into, where the emergency part of it will settle down. The virus will still circulate, but it won't be quite as devastating as it had been. Dr. Blackstock, what does endemic mean?
Right. So I think that there is this misconception about what it means. What it means is steady state level of the virus in the background. And so that steady state can be high. There are places in countries in Africa that are in endemic levels of malaria, and those are high levels. So endemicity doesn't necessarily mean that transmission levels are low. So I think that's something we have to really understand. And the ideal would be if we had low levels of coronavirus, because we know that high levels of transmission are directly related to people getting infected and then hospitalized and then dying. So, we are not at that steady state yet because we're still having surges. And the question is, it's still unclear, when will the next surge be? Will we be prepared for it? We know that about 2/3 of the population is fully vaccinated. We know only a fraction of that is actually boosted. And so those numbers really determine what happens.
In 800 feet, turn left onto Pence Road.
Right? How many people are going to be hospitalized? How many people are going to die? There are many different factors, and we really need to get those vaccinations up as well as those boosters up, because we know that actually impacts the number of people who are hospitalized and die from this virus.
I want to make sure I understand what you're talking about in terms of this being endemic.
Take the next left onto Pence Road.
In terms of our impact with COVID, the current stats show that we are averaging about more than 50,000 daily COVID cases, about 341 deaths per day. And now the CDC says that roughly 3 in 5 people in the U.S. have had COVID.
Right.
It sounds like what you're saying is that when a disease is endemic, we've learned to live with it, but that does not necessarily mean that we're living well with it. We're just used to it. Do I hear you right?
Right. Yes, to some degree, and it also means that there are no outbreaks that would change the level of the virus significantly. So right now we are in another surge. It's not as
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Vile Road.
And that actually is an undercount because many more people are using those rapid at-home tests. So we are in the middle of another surge due to the BA2 subvariant. We're not able to identify how severe this surge is, but it is happening. So if surges are happening, that is the opposite of what endemicity is.
Take the next right onto Vile Road.
Virus. We are still having fluctuation in the level of virus transmission in the community. So that's why I would argue whether or not that's the case. There's a difference between endemicity and the difference between
Continue on Vile Road for 1.5 miles. Continue on Vile Road for 1.5 miles.
That we have Forrest Jules tweeted, because of my health, it means I have to keep going like it's 2020. Stay at home, social distance, mask, the whole works. It is harder to do now than it was in the beginning because people don't understand. Dr. Blackstock, a few quick things I did want to ask you before I got to let you go. I know that Dr. Fauci has backed out of attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday because of COVID concerns. What is your sense of the kind of decision-making
onto Skyway.
When you look at this and you're thinking we're not going to have power for weeks, if not months. Exactly. Every night, it's your news playlist. Top story with Tom Ellis. Weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now. Hold on to your seats. The Thing About Cannabis, the chart-topping podcast series from Dateline and Keith Willison. A strange story.
Turn left onto Skyway.
All episodes are available now, wherever you get your podcasts. Top Story with Tom Galmas is your news playlist on NBC News Now. And now, you can listen to it as a podcast. Available anytime and anywhere. Still to come on the Channel 2 News. Well, the waters are certainly receding. It's still too close to call. Lester Holt reporting from the Ground Zero, as it's being referred to.
The Haitian people know a little something about resiliency. What's the biggest risk right now? Some of the troops who have been driving. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. In fact, we've been told we can't go any farther. There are some resilient folks. Let me get in.
Hold on to your seats. The Thing About Cannabis, the chart-topping podcast series.
Continue on Skyway for 3/4 of a mile.
And the career of Stripes. All episodes are available now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Fire has grown leaps and bounds. You see behind me is typical. Pretty bad.
NBC News, streaming free now. Top Story with Tom Ellis. Weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
Time now for part 2 of our series, Pot Equity, about the future of the cannabis industry. When it comes to regulations, the states are pretty much on their own. 18 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized recreational marijuana.
In a 1/4 mile, turn right onto Oliver Road.
Prior pot convictions. You can see the states that have legalized recreational in green on the map. Now, last week, our series focused on New Jersey. Legalized retail began there last week. Tonight, we head to Massachusetts, where equity has been a focus from the start.
Take the next right onto Oliver Road.
$1 billion city, but once you cross a certain neighborhood, that income level drops off. My name is Kobe Evans. I am actually from this area of Dorchester, which is a part of Boston.
In a 1/4 mile, turn left onto Valley View Drive.
Recreational cannabis dispensary. We sell a lot of flower, we sell a lot of edibles, and then everything in between. You know, when we started, it was just, okay, let's open one store, and then we had a lot of momentum.
When we hit that 5-year mark, there were 18,000 people who were being employed in the state from cannabis. And in revenue, we're approaching the $3 billion mark. At this point, revenue sales for cannabis in the state of Massachusetts have outpaced alcohol sales in the state. Massachusetts was the first state in the country to have equity baked into
Take the next left onto Valley View Drive.
what's worked, what needs some tweaking, what needs to be revised, and where are we?
I think Massachusetts built a great model, and I think that we
Continue on Valley View Drive for 1.5 miles.
One of the things that was created at the beginning was that list of designated areas areas that have been most harmed by the war on drugs.
if you live in certain census tracts, then that qualifies you to be designated as social equity or economic empowerment. I know that trauma that exists from growing up in a neighborhood where it's over-policed. Well, this neighborhood has probably had its fair share of violence and deaths and gang violence. That was a lot of motivation to see high school friends die and to see people go away to jail for, decades, and, all the things that were harmful. Weed was just never one of those things, but it was used as a tool to police people.
Where are we in terms of getting people in this industry that have already been a part of the cannabis industry, but just not in the regulated market?
This is our retail backstock vault. So I was arrested in Norton selling cannabis. I was caught with 70 pounds and about $250,000 in cash. And that was really the end of a long run that I had of selling wholesale in the illegal industry. We have a show flower room window, which is an eye catcher. You know, I spent 9 months in a prison cell for something we're doing legally right here in my hometown now, and that to me is it's eye-opening, and we've come so far in such a little bit of time. We're very small craft cultivation, and we're about 7,000 square feet of canopy space, so that's actual plant canopy. So again, small compared to the industry, you know, up to 100,000 square feet for a tier 10.
Up until 5 years ago, I thought this was a business for criminals and children. You know, I was working in Manhattan. I was running a trading desk. We've raised a little over $10 million, a blend of both equity and debt, and it's expensive. It's expensive to do. It's certainly challenging, and operating costs are millions.
So for 80% of the people who want to get into the industry, funding is the issue. Whatever is bigger than a roadblock, that's what funding tends to be, depending upon the size of your property, where you're located. It could be $30,000 a month in terms of holding costs. It could be $5,000 a month just in terms of the real estate. If you have an attorney involved, that adds another fee to it.
In 1,000 feet, turn left onto Bartles Place.
Assets and credit cards and scrape together the money, and you know, we did a lot of the work ourselves just to get open.
It's not an easy thing to do to roll out a social equity program and to try and make it completely inclusive for those who were harmed by the war on drugs.
And the reality is there is still a lot to be done.
Take the next left onto Bartles Place, then turn right onto Redbud Drive.
In the cannabis space, and a lot of people aren't talking about it. My name is Alfonso Tucky Blunt Jr. I am owner of Blunts and More. I'm the first ex-felon for selling cannabis to have a cannabis retail shop. I was arrested in 2005 for selling cannabis with